I am a massive pussy. If I found myself in a fight, I wouldn't know what to do. And that's a problem. I need to become a man. But how do I do that? I could take up boxing or Muay Thai if I want to learn how to strike properly. I could take up something like Judo or Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu if I want to learn how to grapple. I could even do something a bit more traditional like karate. There are many martial arts out there to choose from, but what do all of these have in common? Something that even boxing and Aikido to Kendo, they all have in common. That's right. They take effort. Sure, I could spend 2 to 3 days a week training so that months or maybe years down the road I know how to fight, but why the hell would I do that? That's long and that takes effort. I have more important things to do. I'm not going to tell you what they are, mind you, but you're going to have to trust me. When in this situation, what is a person to do? Enter Frank Dux, a ninjutsu master who was apparently so great that the CIA had to swipe him up so that he could fight the Vietnamese. A man who won a secret fighting championship called the Kumite or Kumite. Apparently, retiring undefeated after 329 fights. A man who saves children from pirates in his spare time, who holds the world record for most consecutive knockouts in a single tournament, that being 56. What an impressive resume. It's so impressive. It's almost like it's complete bullshit. It's almost like that. I'm not saying that, however, because I am a firm believer in the power of ninjutsu. Did I mention this guy got his own action film? That's right, if anyone's ever seen the 1988 film Bloodsport starring Jean-Claude Van Damme, it's actually based on this man's life, or more accurately, what he says his life was like. Not that there's any reason to be skeptical about any of his claims. If you can't trust the story of a man who claims to have won 329 fights and basically become a super secret super soldier using the power of ninjutsu, well then, who can you trust? But you know, some people have been saying that this man is a fake, slandering his good name, and I won't stand for it. I'm going to go over this man's life and illustrate that there is nothing shady about his claims, and that he truly is a legend in need of worshipping, and maybe, just maybe, I'll learn to be as badass as him. This is the story of Frank Dux. The story of Frank begins in California, where all badass super soldiers come from. At the age of 13, he was taken under the wing of ninjutsu master Sensei Tanaka. I apologise if I butchered his name or any other Japanese words I'll have to pronounce later. I haven't balanced my chi energy today, so that's probably why. Now, Sensei Tanaka was a ninjutsu master, an intelligence officer, and kumite champion. Impressive, I know. Apparently they met in a judo tournament. Now, why Sensei would waste his time with judo when he has the magic of ninjutsu on his side is anyone's guess, but after being impressed with Frank's skills, he decided to train him. Now, I just want to repeat that Frank Dux was 13 when Sensei first started to train him and did so up until the age of 16. So, what training methods did Sensei use to train his young pupil? Well, there were many, but let me just list a few of my favourites, the best of the ninjutsu experience. Tying stake to Frank's leg and then having him chased by an Akita, otherwise known as the Japanese bear dog, having Frank spar his nephews using sharp swords, and a personal favourite, just flat out torturing him. He's just stretching his limbs apart like some medieval contraption. He's supposed to be a kid when all of this is happening. Now, some of you may be thinking, Mug, or however you want to shorten my username, call me Gary for all I care, don't you think this is a little extreme? Well, young ones, extreme tactics produce extreme warriors. The way I see it, Frank is just a modern day Spartan. Only better. Oh, and I also forgot to mention, Sensei Tanaka taught Frank blocking techniques by getting him to perform chores. Now, I know what you're thinking. Isn't that the Karate Kid? And the answer is yes. Yes, it is. So I think it's very obvious what's going on here. Clearly the writer behind the Karate Kid knew about Sensei and took inspiration when writing the film. How else would you possibly explain this? Now, one of Frank's deductors may try and argue that his life story is complete fiction and he was basing it off other works of fiction, but that's clearly not true, because after all, who would be stupid enough to base their life story that they're making up off famous works of fiction? I mean, that would be such clear evidence that you're lying, only someone as dumb as Homer Simpson would possibly try it, so that possibility goes out the window. Mind you, it doesn't help matters that there's very little evidence for his ninjutsu master's existence. See, Sensei Tanaka, despite supposedly being a world-famous ninjutsu master, has very little evidence for his existence. In fact, it seems only Frank himself trained with him, well, him and his nephews. Now, I say little because there was a Senzo Tanaka that lived near Frank during the time period Frank said he did, but Senzo wasn't a ninjutsu master. He was a farmer. That must have been his cover story. Senzo sort of had a Clark Kent thing going on, except he just used the same name for both of his identities. There are also other inconsistencies between Frank's description and what historically seems to be true, but I'm sure that's all part of the cover-up. I wouldn't doubt Frank after all. You'll find no heresy on this YouTube channel. Before I move on to the next section of the video, I want to stress, I do not nor have practiced any martial art, whether it be Taekwondo, Aikido, Krav Maga, Muay Thai, Hema, the list goes on and on and on and on and on and on and on. Point being, I'm not the guy to go to when it comes to martial arts advice. However, just like you don't need to be a physicist to tell that the earth isn't flat, you don't need to be a martial arts master to tell when something is just a load of bollocks. Or, you know, pure genius, because that's what Frank is. Now, before I talk about the Kumite, which is, for me, the most interesting part of Frank's story, I think I should cover his fighting style, so that way it gives you a better picture of how he fought in the Kumite tournament. I'll only cover this briefly as, like I said, this is in no way my expertise, but it's at least worth mentioning. Frank Dux, like many ninjutsu masters, likes to focus on chi energy and pressure points. Just watch him here teach you how to dispose of an attacker. Now you may be thinking, how the hell am I supposed to pull that off on someone trying to deck me in the face?
Well, citizen, that's an excellent question, and I thank you for it. I think it's great we live in a town where you can ask questions, because without questions, we just have answers.
What can I say? You just need to keep studying your Frank Dux and you'll learn how in no time. Apparently, Dux takes inspiration from the Johnny Cage school of fighting, as he's also a man that enjoys him some nut shots. In fact, he likes them a lot, hence why there's quite a few in Bloodsport. Now, there are some people that say you can't just rely on groin shots.
No, it kept going. I have somebody in a rear naked choke, and I said, so, and explaining, and she goes, to somebody else, she said, we will poke the eyes out now. And I go, oh, excuse me, what was that? And she said, we will poke your eyes out right now. I said, wow. I said, put my arm around her neck. I said, okay, in 3 seconds I'm going to go. If you touch my eye, I'm going to break your neck, okay? Let's go. and she goes, well, what did you say? I said, in 3 seconds we're going to go. I will count down. You come near to my fucking eye, I'm going to break your neck, okay? And she said, no, what do you mean? I said, okay, you know what? Normally when somebody touches my eye, you think I'm going to go, oh, no, I'm going to go, they touch my eye, go, and I'm going to go, motherfucker.
But what do those people know? They're MMA fighters, they have to fight with rules, but out there in the street, there are no rules. Which is why in street fights, MMA fighters just flop like fish, while ninjutsu masters, well, they always come out on top. Also, he does a lot of kung fu style moves named after different animals, which is always fun. Frank is also capable of smashing bottles of JD with his hand. It's so impressive, he's able to make it break just like a prop bottle. Now, I won't lie, even I had my doubts when I first saw this, and I'm ashamed to admit, I lost my faith in ninjutsu for a moment. I mean, who would waste a perfectly good bottle of Jack Daniels? But then I remembered to trust him, Frank, as this is clearly all part of his divine plan. Now, when I think of the word Kumite, I think of a YouTube radio show, but the word Kumite just means freestyle fighting. Its literal translation is grappling hands. Now, throughout this video, I've been referencing a fighting tournament called the Kumite, so what is it? Well, basically, it's a secret fighting tournament run by the International Fighting Arts Association. Who are the International Fighting Arts Association? Look guys, it's going to be a long enough video as it is, trust me. The rabbit hole goes deep. This is like Warhammer levels of fluff, you've got to trust me on this. But they're an organisation that run the Kumite every 5 years, as well as more minuscule events in between. Now I made the assumption that the reason the tournament is a secret is because it is illegal, but you know what they say about assuming, you make an ass out of you and me. Turns out the reason why it was kept a secret is because the losers didn't want to disrespect their arts. Geez, someone should have let the old UFC fighters in on this. Would have helped protect their brand a bit. Frank also says it's like this for protection purposes, stops the champions from getting challenged all the time. Although I must say, I pity the person that challenges a martial arts champion. Especially Conor McGregor, it might ruin your next bus ride. On top of that, apparently fighters didn't want their super secret techniques being exposed to the world. In order to partake in this tournament, you must have been invited, and your master must be a member of the International Fighting Arts Association. So how do you become a member?
Well, citizen, that's an excellent question, and I thank you for it.
The rules of the tournament only prohibit eye gouging and biting, so it's basically UFC 1. An excellent setting for Master Dux to show off his ninjutsu prowess. There are some key differences, however, the most significant being that they fought in different kinds of arenas, all without ropes. The first is basically just a boxing ring. The second is a runaway platform, like fencing or modelling. And finally, on a rooftop. Now, what I haven't mentioned is that you can also win a fight by knocking your opponent out of the arena. Hey, if it works for Soul Calibur, why not? I'm not quite sure what's the point in having these different styles of arenas, but yet again, what the fuck do I know? Maybe it's like players for Street Fighter or Mortal Kombat switching around with players for Tekken and Dead or Alive. Completely changes the dynamic. I don't think you're allowed weapons in the Kumite, which is a shame because the runaway platform would have really given some swordsmen their time to shine. Oh well, it's not like it matters anyway, they're all fighting the second coming of Christ. Now, Frank, when fighting in this tournament, won every single fight he was in, beating 329 fighters in the process. I know, it's unbelievable. Sounds like Floyd's got some competition. Actually, that's a fight I'd pay to see. Also, he was able to knock out 56 opponents in a row. And if you think that's not plausible, well then you need to go watch the documentary Kung Fury. Now at this point, you are surely thinking, wow, this tournament sounds amazing and Frank Dux sounds legendary. It's just a shame that this was such a big secret that there's no evidence of its existence, and I agree, it is a shame. But don't you worry your pretty little head, because a European action star is here to save the day. Bloodsport, the 1988 film starring Jean-Claude Van Damme documenting Frank Dux' participation in the tournament. See, the writer for the film was really impressed by Frank and adapted his story about the Kumite into a screenplay. To be honest, the fact that Frank got his own film is what inspired me to make this video. I mean, there are quite a few ninjutsu masters, self-proclaimed but nevertheless, but none of them have got their own film before, which must only speak to the credibility of Frank. Now we get to see him on the big screen, we get to see him in action, or at least how he fought in action. After all, he helped choreograph the film himself, so you know it's legit. Now even Jean-Claude Van Damme can't perfectly emulate Frank Dux. I mean, he is a ninjutsu master, but we'll get a pretty good idea of how he fought. In the first Kumite fight, Frank grabs his opponent's arm with both hands and starts to awkwardly slap him until he wins the fight. Well, I guess that must be a really effective ninjutsu technique. There's another fight of Frank where he wins by rolling forward as his opponent just stands there still. Then Frank jumps up, kicks him in the face, knocking him out of the ring. Now, a bit strange, but hey, I guess the guy didn't see the attack coming. After all, it's all part of the ninja fighting style. But Frank's impressive fighting ability doesn't end there. There is an excellent fight where Sensei Master Dux wins by just exchanging kicks with his opponent, literally one after the other. Frank kicks him, he kicks back. Frank kicks him, he kicks back. And they keep doing this until Frank wins. And I agree with this strategy. There is nothing quite like a polite kick exchange to strike fear into your enemies' hearts. But truly, Frank's best demonstration of skill in this film is in the final fight where he's fighting the second best of the Kumite tournament. Frank's opponent attacks him by rolling towards him as any sensible fighter would, and Frank counters by jumping over the guy and then roundhouse kicking him 4 to 5 times until he finally drops unconscious. Wow, what an amazing fighting style. How is anybody supposed to stop this? It was so good, in fact, that Frank ended up working for the military and the CIA. So not only is Frank a ninja, but he is also a spy working for the CIA. See, after Senzo Tanaka was done training him, he enlisted into the military. You may be thinking, wait, isn't this round the same time he was supposed to be fighting in the Kumite? How was he able to fight in the military and fight in the Kumite round about the same time?
That's an excellent question.
Now, Frank's skills were so amazing that even though he had no prior military experience whatsoever, he was sent on super secret missions right after he had finished boot camp. We don't know many details about these missions, them being super secret and all, but we do know that he got stabbed with a bayonet, a stab that apparently didn't leave a mark behind. That's the power of ninjutsu for you. Frank was apparently so good that he was given the Medal of Honor by the president himself. Now, there's no record of this in his military history. In fact, all his military history actually states is that he was a wireman for roughly 130 days. Apparently was never even deployed in Vietnam. But hey, I'm sure that's all part of the cover-up. I mean, if the government has to cover up alien technology, well then it's gonna cover up something as powerful as Frank Dux. After Frank served in the military, he was hired by a CIA director. Frank stated that the CIA director asked for, and I quote, "a badass who don't take no shit from any motherfucker." Samuel Jackson apparently works for the CIA, but Frank was so secret that there's no proof of him working in the CIA. In fact, only the CIA director himself was supposed to know about him. I like that. It's the perfect role for a ninja working in the CIA. Top secrecy here. Now you may be wondering, if he was so secret that the government wasn't even supposed to know about him, then how am I able to share all this information with you all? Well, just because he can't share information with, say, the president, there's nothing saying that he can't share information with martial arts magazines and interviews, as long as you only imply that you're working for the CIA.
True or false, you remain an active undercover off-the-books employee of the CIA? That's a very good question.
Then it's A-OK. You'll get into no trouble. See, Frank is such a good ninja that he has mastered hiding in plain sight. I've told you all these amazing things about the ninjutsu master, but I know that to truly convert you to the way of the ninja, you're going to need some evidence. I mean, you are going to want some proof, right? Well, don't you worry, because I am here to demonstrate that everything Frank claims about his life is 100% true. I've already covered the proof about his ninjutsu master existing, even if the details we know about him are slightly different. So, let's jump right into the kumite. How do we know that it is real? Well, for a start, Frank won a trophy, a big trophy. That right there, doesn't that prove he won the tournament? Oh, wait, what's that? A trophy shop claims to have made the trophy and provided proof that Frank bought it off them. Well, I'm sure that's nothing. Just another one of those lies made to slander Frank. I'm sure the CIA could have done that easily. They've got control over all the trophy shops, I'm telling you. But that's not the only proof that Frank was in the kumite, because he also won a sword. Now, he doesn't have it anymore. Not because it's made up. He did have the sword, but he sold it to pirates in exchange for the freedom of children in the Philippines. Apparently, that didn't work, as Frank and some friends had to take up arms and fight the pirates in order to liberate the children. Well, I'm glad that's all cleared up. For a moment, someone could have thought that Frank was just lying. But that is obviously not the case. But just to further establish the fact that the kumite is clearly real, some people tried to contact the International Fighting Arts Association, and it turns out their organisation shares the same address as Frank Dux' house. Okay, even I'll say, this is starting to look a tiny bit suspicious, but if it looks like Frank isn't being 100% honest, then don't you worry, because Frank can explain. You see, Frank is in this dilemma. On one hand, he needs to keep up his public image and keep giving interviews, and on the other hand, he needs to do super secret CIA stuff. So, he gets around this with the use of body doubles that go out there and represent him when he's out there saving children from pirates or whatever he has to do. That means if Frank ever says anything inconsistent or factually incorrect, then there's no need to worry, because that wasn't Frank. That was just one of his body doubles. Now don't you feel silly for doubting him. But if you're still skeptical, well then it's time for the big one. We can see who is right about the effectiveness of Juke Ninjutsu, because there is one fight that Frank got into with eyewitnesses around, so we can finally look together and see how effective Frank Dux' fighting style is. Finally, some proof that Frank is the ninjutsu master he claims to be. This is Frank versus Zane Frazier. Frank hired Zane Frazier for his martial arts school as an instructor for the academy, but was fired shortly after without reason given. I guess Frank wasn't comfortable having someone teach fake martial arts like kickboxing when he was trying to teach them about the real shit. The ninjutsu shit. After this, Frazier opened up his own dojo nearby, taking a lot of Frank's students and as a result profit with him. Frank didn't like this and decided to try and scare Frazier away with death threats. Apparently Frank had even tried to take out a hit on Frazier. Turns out Frazier wasn't going to take this sitting down and decided to confront Dux at a martial arts show. Now from this point, there are two accounts of what happened. You see, there's Frank Dux' account of what happened, and then there's everybody else's account of what happened. On the side of everyone who isn't Frank Dux, said that Frank and Zane were in a heated argument and then Dux went in for a punch but found himself getting the crap beaten out of him and tossed onto a table. According to Frank's account, Zane Frazier approached him asking for a fight, and apparently Zane was being so overdramatic about it that the crowd all laughed at him and he had to leave in embarrassment. Then, 20 minutes later, he comes back and sneaks a punch to Frank's head while wearing brass knuckles. But that doesn't stop Frank from getting him into a triangle choke. Or I should say almost, because right before Frank is about to pull the triangle choke off, he gets kicked in the back of the head. Next thing he knows, there are 5 guys, all MMA fighters, trying to beat him up, but, and I quote, "they couldn't handle me." Me being Frank, of course. So, which story do you think is more likely to be true? The one where Frank punched first but then got the crap beaten out of him, or the one where he gets surprised attack and a old unhealthy ninjutsu master is taken on 5 MMA fighters after receiving a brass knuckle punch to the head? I know who I believe. So with that being said guys, I hope this video inspired you to become a ninjutsu master. I know I've learned how to become a fighting champion with no effort required. I mean, I can just pay a body double to do it all for me. Bam! Instant ninjutsu warrior. But hey, if I do finally want to put the effort in, well then I can always find a Japanese farmer to help me get the fighting skills that I need.
It's an issue with mental health, social ostracization, and a societal-wide fetish for violence.
You blame it on the Kumite because you're bitch made, because you're bitch made. You blame the fucking Kumite because you're bitch made, yeah, you fucking bitch made. You blame it on the Kumite because you're bitch made.